I titled this talk, Moving Through Endings and Beginnings with Compassion, but actually it could have multiple names, and you can see what appeals to you, what speaks to your experience, resonates with you. Another title might have been Keep Calmly Knowing Change. Keep calmly knowing change. Wow, what a challenge, particularly this last few months here in this country. Another possible title might have been When Nothing's Left Out, True Peace is Here Now. And the fourth could be any phrase or word that flares up for you as a lighted guidepost or feels like home. So see how it lands for you. Maybe it could be as simple as this 3-line haiku from a poet, John Brehm. Sleepless night, Buddha unbothered on the altar. Sleepless night, Buddha unbothered on the altar. Earlier this month, David and I were visiting Toronto with our granddaughter on a grandparent-grandchild trip. Great fun for anybody who's done something like that. And we traveled around Toronto with a group of folks, grandparents, grandchildren, by streetcar. We did a lot of walking, and we also rode the subway. And down below ground at the subway stations, what we noticed were these triangular signs with 3 words written on them: mind the gap. So maybe you've seen those signs in your own travels elsewhere. Mind the gap. So it's a visual warning, if you've never seen that sign, to rail passengers particularly, to pay attention when you move across that space between the edge of the platform and the train door. Mind the gap. And it's actually an invitation to slow down. Slow down. Pay attention to what's going on right here in this tiny moment between 2 steps. Ever since I came across that phrase years ago, it seems like such a great way to begin to notice gaps everywhere. So small gaps, the one between the in-breath and the out-breath. The gap between the rising of one feeling state and the next one. Between the ending and the beginning of not only feeling states, but sensations in the body as well. And if you can capture it, between the ending and the beginning, thought to thought. Can you see the gap between the ending of one thought, the beginning of the next? And if we examine our experience closely, we discover that we are always in transition, and we know this, impermanence. During every moment of our lives, something's ending and something is beginning. And in between is this gap, is this space. In the Tibetan language and understanding, there's a word bardo for this transitional space. And typically, traditionally, in Buddhist spiritual traditions, to be in the bardo is to be between one life and the next one, or between death and rebirth. And if we were going to more fully understand the meaning of bardos, we would be reading and studying a lot. But tonight, we're just going to look at one aspect of this concept. So bardo is that gap or that space that's between. We're in the bardo when we are at the end of one thing and before the beginning of the next. It's kind of a between time, if you will. And it could be large, life-changing, like that of the end of a long-term relationship, the death of a loved one, or a beloved pet, or a companion, or the space between the ending of one job and the beginning of the next one. So again, to be in the bardo, or the gap, is to be in between, is to be between the ending and the beginning of two things. And we've mentioned the breath as one small example of the ending of the one breath and the beginning of the next. And as much as we might try to resist, endings are happening every moment, like the breath, but it happens at the ending of one day, the beginning of the next, the end of a relationship, and ultimately the end of our life. And the thing about the ending is that there is a beginning, though it's often unclear what that will look like, sometimes even unfathomable, what the beginning will hold for us. The word bardo can also have other implications. It's an interval, yes, and a gap. And it can be brief or it can be much longer. One that's barely noticed or one that's life-altering. It can also act as a boundary that divides and separates the beginning and the ending, marking the end of one thing, the beginning of the next. And we also might consider it as a link between the two, the ending, the beginning. So it serves as a bridge or a stepping stone. It's like a crossing over, if you will, a transition to the next, whatever's next. So in a sense, bardo is a crossroads. It doesn't belong here or there. It's neither this nor that. It's an open space. And these bridging moments happen continuously throughout our lives in big ways and small, as I've said. But it's an opportunity to pause and sometimes maybe to see the grip of the ego, the solidity with which we sometimes view ourselves as we're like this, we're like that. And letting a confusion that may arise, particularly in the case of a life-changing bardo, just to notice that, what's arising. And the bridging moment can be filled with a lot of uncertainty and confusion. But there's an opportunity to see that confusion, see that worry, that anxiety, and observe it and just see what else might be there. So, for example, we might feel confused or scared, but we also might have some sense of liberation in that moment, open to maybe another possibility where anything might happen, could arise. Perhaps you experienced a bardo on Sunday when you heard the news of an ending, a change in the presidential leadership of this country. A bardo with uncertainty, perhaps confusion or hope or worry. Ending and a beginning. The uncertainty can bring fear as well as anxiety, especially when it's huge, when it's quite large, because we want some control, some predictability. That's where we're comfortable. We want to know what's up ahead. because there's comfort in what's familiar and fear in terms often of letting go of what's known. If we cling tightly, too tightly to the memory of what's past, maybe a relationship that's ended that we did not wish to end, if we stay there, we can become somewhat frozen, and there can be constriction, a tightness. It's almost like we're inside of a box and blind to a new beginning or an opening. And sometimes, of course, we do this to protect ourselves with the hope that we won't feel quite as much pain or anxiety. But that protection can run in the direction of becoming like an armor, a sheathing that imprisons the heart. Isn't it true that life's unwanted aspects are often the raw material necessary for awakening compassion? Whenever there's a death of one state of the mind, there's the birth of another. The past is gone, the future is not quite here yet. And the invitation here is to let go of what was known, to give up trying to hold on to one thing. So what happens if we, in that moment between the ending and the beginning, what happens if we remind ourselves of our own goodness and let go? Not discounting whatever's arising, be it fear, anxiety, confusion, worry, but acknowledging it's here, and now what? So we might invite the gap to actually widen, to grow larger. And in that noticing or that invitation to relax with an intention to let go of the need that we have for some control or some need to know. So it's possible that being in the bardo is a doorway to awakening. And I mentioned that another title for this talk might be Keep Calmly Knowing Change. So those words, 4 words, keep calmly knowing change. You could take each one of those and just reflect on their meanings for you as you sit in the bardo. We could also invite a couple of other qualities to this experience, including curiosity, which has a tendency both to open us and maybe to relax us a little bit. You know, what's here now? What's up? And Pema Chodron, whom many of you know as a down-to-earth Dharma teacher, says it clearly. She says, how we live is how we die. That's the title of one of her books, actually. How we live is how we die. How we deal with smaller changes may in fact inform how we deal with larger changes, so we can practice with the smaller, easier ones, knowing that there will be large ones at some point. 3 weeks ago, on July 3rd, a Buddha Dharma teacher named Eric Colvig died in New Hampshire. And I had the privilege of sitting with Eric on several retreats, and he I learned a lot from Eric. He taught a forgiveness meditation that opens with these lines. I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to be imperfect. I allow myself to be a learner, still learning life's lessons. I forgive myself for any harm that I may have done. And if I can't forgive myself completely now, may I do so in the future. About a week before his death, Eric wrote an open letter and posted it. And this is what it said. If these were the last words I would write to you, what would they be? The words are oh so familiar, quickly read and easily forgotten, but I repeat them anyway, because they describe the way to freedom. I have a terminal illness. If I accept what I cannot change, I do not suffer about the illness. In fact, I do not suffer about it. I live near a large, beautiful lake. It would be wonderful to paddle my seaworthy kayak around the islands and to swim in the clear, deep waters of Lake Winnipesaukee. That cannot happen. I accept and do not suffer. I will probably die soon without seeing the outcome of a brave challenge to our democracy, into our Constitution. I accept and do not suffer. From an expanded view, I feel optimism for you with this challenge because I know that all people deep down want to be free. For most of my life, I've had a body that people have seen as desirable. He was very good looking. Now, this body is misshapen, grossly overweight. Its legs are swollen, with its lower legs covered with sores. I do my best to accept this body as it is. That's the hardest thing for me to accept. I mostly succeed, so I'm mostly free from suffering over this condition that I cannot change. Isn't it all pretty obvious? If you cannot change the circumstance, accept whatever is unpleasant to you, and you will not suffer. Allow what you love to pass away. We have to practice again and again and again. If you're suffering, it means you want something. Let the wanting go and watch the suffering go with it. Loss is certain. Accept loss if it can't be changed. By your acceptance, you free yourself from suffering. Identify what you fear most. What you fear most. Imagine what you fear most is actually happening and you cannot change it. Imagine that you accept even a little the thing you most fear as it happens. Notice how the fear lessens and how your suffering lessens. Does what I write here make sense to you? It's not theoretical. It really works. I see every day that it works. This is all you need to know in order to experience freedom today, tomorrow, always. Love, Eric. He added a PS. If you want to remember me, make a bumper sticker that says, be good to people. We don't have to wait for enormous transitions to force us into reckoning with groundlessness. We can begin now to notice the transitory nature of each day, of each hour. We can keep calmly knowing change, because whatever life we're in is a vehicle for waking up. We can work with our general fear and anxiety about the fact that we're not in control. The joy of mindfulness, awareness of endings and beginnings, and the gap between them, being present to all that arises, whatever comes up, whether you like it or not. We don't have to approve of what comes up. Just be present, whether we like it or not. It's the unconditional presence that matters. Be here with open eyes, open heart, open minds, letting go. All else will flow from that. And go back to Pema Chodron for just a moment. She says, most of the time we'd rather dwell in the illusion of control and certainty than to recognize how unpredictable life and death are. And she says, we could ask ourselves, is it a problem that I have so little control? Is it a problem that when I plan my day, it often, even usually, turns out differently than I had predicted or planned? My computer crashed Sunday a week ago. I know exactly all about that one. Is it a problem? We can ask ourselves, is it possible to just trust what she calls the natural choreography of life? What if we experiment to the best of our ability in letting things sort of naturally unfold? What will emerge? What might be, and could we consider it to be, the natural choreography of life? It actually might be more inspired or more creative than anything the mind could come up with. And I think what she's talking about is trusting the natural choreography of life is another way of talking about trusting the truth of reality. So we go ahead and we make plans, but we're open to seeing them change. And as a result, maybe our insistence on predictability might weaken a bit. And of course, sometimes our old habit will still be very seductive, and it'll be nearly impossible to trust the natural choreography of life. And we'll resort to old patterns, old habits. But in those cases, we simply notice this tendency to want to control and greet it with some kindness. It's a matter of seeing our habit and not criticizing ourselves for it. This kind of self-reflection will also give us empathy for all those who want to be in control, which is just about everybody. To be alive, fully human, completely awake, is to be continually thrown out of the nest. Thrown out of the nest. So to be fully alive is to be actually living in the wild, not knowing. To be experiencing each moment as completely new. To be willing to die to whatever has just happened, whatever has just ended, and to let it go. The 7th century poet Rumi put it like this: today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. That line, empty and frightened, from Rumi's writing might reflect what we see as our imperfections, distractibility, fears. Some were passed down to us, of course, by ancestors. Some have lessened over time, but some remain in the daily landscape. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Rumi's contemporaries read books. We scan the internet, right? Filling our minds with images and sounds and the experiences of others, and pushing away our own for a while, ignoring what's difficult, what's painful or uncertain. Take down a musical instrument. Be present. Mind the gap. Touch your own aliveness. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. We can open our hearts, embrace the world, or turn away. We can know spirituality not as a journey toward perfection, rather as a journey toward wholeness. And we can see that we are so interconnected, interexisting, that even the smallest act with a clear intention has repercussions throughout the web of life. It's not an easy practice, but it's doable. Mind the gap. Keep calmly knowing change. Choose what's skillful, what's compassionate, what's wholesome. I'll close with this poem by Mary Oliver. When death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps that purse shut, even when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what's it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does toward silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. mind the gap, keep calmly knowing change. Full of compassion for ourselves and for each other. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for your practice.